extensive curriculum. Kai is the elect president of International Federation for Information Processing and reputable expert in cybersecurity, coordinating European projects in the area. Thank you very much, Kai, for being with us in this celebration. And at this moment, I will pass the control for you. The stage is yours.
Okay, so yes, muy obrigado. Thanks a lot for this an honorful invitation to this seminar, Jubilee seminar for LaSiD. I'm very proud that I was invited for this, and my muy felicidades for LaSiD and the great work that it has been doing. I'd like to, well, make sure that actually you see my slides, and I wonder whether that is working at the moment or not. And yeah, probably now you see, okay, now you see some slides in black and white, which are, well, actually they should have been colorful. That is interesting. Let's see how we get with that one. And let's try to set that one. Or maybe I'll.
Kai, it's perfect. We can see your slides.
Okay. Eventually, I wanted to work with this color, but somehow these slides are in black and white. Anyway, let's see as we go in black and white. So thanks a lot
it's really
again
fine. It's really
for your patience. And yes, and congratulations on the 30th años de LaSiD, and which is a jubilee. And as you may know, actually, I'm in Singapore at the moment, but of course, I'm originally coming from Germany, and you may know in Germany we're actually remembering the 80 years, and this week have been remembering the 80 years of the end of the Second World War. And for Germany, that also meant the being liberated from the dictatorship of the Nazi dictatorship and an eventual return of democracy to Germany. And it's a big honor, of course, for me to present in Brazil, even virtually, because we know that in those dark days of Nazi government, and Brazil was one of the safe homes for some of the people who needed to evade Germany because of their stance for democracy and the like. And I'm also mentioning that because the topics that I'm talking about today, the European Union Digital Identity Wallet and its relation to multilateral security, actually has, beyond technology and distributed systems, it has a democracy, freedom, and balance of power aspect in it. That's why I'm mentioning this at the beginning. So what I'd like to do with you is I'd like to introduce this European Union Digital Identity Wallet Initiative and Regulation, just that you see what is the setting, and you can probably hopefully then put it in relation into the Brazil scenario, which I'm interested in receiving comments on. I will then, as I put it in the title, and make some fundamental remarks on multilateral security and what we mean with that and identity management. And then we will come and look into a closer detail of the internet service architecture issues with regard to privacy and security issues when it comes to identity management. Basically, the things that the wallet is designed and supposed to overcome. So why wallets are useful, and that is then actually part number 4, where we show what is the good side of the wallet. And then, of course, you will see, like with many complex technical systems, the implementation is important, and one needs to care for certain issues. And that is where, let's say, the details are coming in. And I hope that is interesting for you to see where we're standing in this and what we still need to solve. And as I'm a German professor, you get a summary and a conclusion and an outlook. Otherwise, I will lose my pension, and I don't want to risk that even for this presentation. So let's start with the European Union wallet. This is actually a graphic sign that you see from the European Union and the European Commission for the initiative. This wallet has been coming and been introduced by a European Union regulation from last year, a bit more than a year old. The initiative is about 2 or 3 years old, and it is coming in actually as an extension of the European Digital Identity Framework, EIDAS. Maybe some of you have heard about the EIDAS regulation from 2014, the first generation, which was basically establishing digital signatures and identification credentials and things like that. And now with the extension, the idea is to say, okay, and European member states should in future be responsible to deliver to their citizens and their businesses and all the residents. So if you go to Europe and take residence there for a while, you would also be exposed to this, or you would have the chance to get such a wallet that is to be used in the European Union and cost-free. And obviously, such an infrastructure, when the European Union says, hey, all member states should do this, requires a number of synchronization activities. And for that, there is a number of implementing acts, because indeed, we will see that it's not a trivial exercise to set something like this up. This is actually the ecosystem. I hope with the black and white, we can still see what is going on, because it also shows you who is actually involved in the whole matter. So the first thing is, which is a good thing, you see the wallet user, which is a citizen, also in the middle of the picture. We will later see other pictures or earlier pictures we will see, and where the citizen is not in the middle of it. And then you have this member states who are basically to finance all of that. They will probably not do that by themselves, but they will task some wallet providers, maybe state institutions, or maybe some companies who are doing this, maybe some of the big hyperscalers, and to make sure that that doesn't create too much of an issue, we will see later. I have to see what the kind of regulation is. The idea of these wallets is basically that, and when wallet users want to use services from a service provider, like logging into a web page, maybe for ordering a trip, or for chatting in a social network or something like that, then they obviously need to log in somehow, and to do that in a better fashion, we'll come back to details later. They should have some kind of an identifier, and that is being issued. And that document, obviously, they will show here to the service provider, and then they can get in. If you want to know and have a closer look on what actually is that identifier scenario, you see the type of data that, for example, can be in the wallet, like an identifier or an ID, to some degree close to maybe a passport or an ID card, but then also digital documents with attestations of certain attributes. So maybe that you have living in a certain city, which gives you access to maybe things which are only available for people of that municipality, and maybe is a certificate which tells that you're over 18 or whatever kind of age you need to get certain privileges, or maybe whatever kind of a doctor's license, professional license, driving license. So this is the area between the wallet user and the service provider and the issuers of digital IDs. They are issuing these kind of things over there. And you will see that this ecosystem is not trivial, and we'll take a closer look at it. And that is coming there now. But first, we have a few things on what is multilateral security and what is identity management in certain things. So this is a picture that describes a bit that, of course, in a distributed system, you have different parties, and they're all not necessarily all on the same politics and policy. They have different interests. That can be customers and merchants, that can be communication partners, that can be citizens versus administration, and especially scenarios like citizen administration, customers and merchants. And of course, they are indeed fitting to this wallet scenario. If you take a look at it with a telecommunications network or so, you have network operators, you have subscribers, you have service providers, and of course, things are getting more complex, and you have maybe contact providers when you have a lot of consortia. And the relation between those are ideally fair and balanced relations, which is not always the case in practice. And that's why multilateral security is important, because the idea is to say, okay, we have to take a look at all of these different parties and their interests and try to balance that. First thing is to indeed accept that there are probably conflicts. Sometimes you have security policies which are saying, hey, there will never be conflicts because one party is ruling everything. That's not what we want to have, and because it doesn't work in reality anyway. And then the interests need to be respected of the parties. And in the end, they should have some sovereignty on what they're doing. We'll see examples for that. So this respecting of interests and supporting of sovereignty, you can see here also described in a few more details. And we will basically see whether the wallet is in the position to indeed handle this in a way as we would like to have it. And that means, for example, first, of course, that parties can define their own interests, and that a conflict can be recognized and negotiated, and also that ideally a result that is negotiated can be enforced, and you're not just on the, let's say, down to the grace and generosity of the other party. And that means also you should not be forced to place too much trust into the technology of others and the honesty of others. A typical counterexample what we have at the moment with current credential holders and chip cards and the like is, of course, is indeed your banking card. You get a banking card from your bank and you put it into, for example, a cash machine to get cash. And you hope that when what you're typing in terms of the amount of money that you want to get will be paid out, and will also, that amount will hopefully be also and only withdrawn from your account. But you neither control the chip card or the card, nor you control the machine. There is hopefully some regulations that will balance that. But from the technology point of view, as a customer, you're basically pretty much on your own, and there is not much technical protection for you. And so that is one of the things that one needs to consider. The other element is, and what is about this identity management thing? Most people first, when it's about identity management, think about the left column here, and which is basically organizations aiming to sort out user accounts and authentication, rights management, access control. And for that, it's usually easy to unify identities and identifiers to make everything easier. So you know about single sign-on systems and the like. And that's pretty much what's coming in on this left side of identity management, which is also very often the only thing that sometimes you see being presented by some players, easing single sign-on and solving problems with multiple passwords. But there is actually, if you go to the real life, and you will see that there is actually another element of identity management that is important. And that is what we see here with differentiated identities. That basically means that, okay, you're usually presenting yourself in the internet or somewhere in different roles, maybe as a professional, or maybe as a private person, maybe as a volunteer for a good case or cause. And you have different identities. There are sometimes pseudonyms. For example, maybe if you're and you have different email accounts, maybe with different names, you have maybe different trade names on social networks, or maybe on eBay, if that is popular in your environment, or chat names. And the idea is basically to be able to present only those elements or those attributes of yourself that are relevant for the specific transaction. Not everybody in your office needs to know and what kind of things you're bidding on the weekend on whatever kind of auction platform or so, and what your favorite hobby is, or things that you're really wanting to pay money for. That is your private life. And maybe you don't want to have a discussion about that in the office, maybe where you whatever things have other things you have to do. So helping people to present the right identity in the right context. That is a very important aspect of identity management. And again, obviously an element of multilateral security. That's also why in principle, these two things should be seen as equivalent. Very often you see rather the white thing than the gray thing, but that is important. And now we will see whether that indeed is actually implemented in typical internet service access architectures. Imagine probably not. That's why the wallet is hopefully coming in or can help about that. And for that, we take a look at the typical service architecture that you probably know nowadays on the internet. A bit abstracted here, but anyway, you're a user and you're trying to rely and to log into any kind of service provider, again, any kind of portal, maybe a social network portal or whatever, and you request access. That is step number one. And usually the operator, the service provider of this portal, which now very often we'll call relying party because they're basically relying on some kind of attestation, they will probably not put much trust in you, but maybe into some kind of party that is identity service provider. That's what you see. And so from that point of view, you're requesting access, okay, and you're getting something back as a policy and to log in, maybe with your own an account or something, but maybe via something else. And indeed, this is an older picture that is on purpose. Facebook login you see very often, or Google login. And in the earlier days, you would have seen in Access not doing that very much. But the idea is to say, okay, somehow user is not being trusted so much by this relying party, but when they would come with an account that has been also used or certified by some other platform, then that user would now suddenly be more trusted or trustworthy to the relying party than before. And so what basically is then happening is you may be logging into whatever, Google, Facebook, or whatever, and that login will then enable access you on the place where you actually want to go. And that is a very typical scenario of internet access. Maybe you've used it from time to time also. And of course, it is convenient to some degree, but there are issues with it. And so what is the first issue? that we see from a privacy point of view. In principle, whenever you log into that portal and you go via this route, the identity service provider, like for example, Facebook or so, they're learning what kind of relying party you're interested in. So they will know which kind of other things in the internet you're interested in. And also they know and notice when you're actually going to do that. So this, and when you're using this identity service provider, not just for one relying party, but for many of them, an identity service provider gets a very precise view and perspective on your interest on the internet and what you're doing and when. And that is clearly an issue from the privacy point of view, because it can become a very big, powerful profile, especially when it's an organization that has that information for many users. There's actually another way also how things can happen, and that you may have seen for logging into the internet, that is called token transfer. So basically you're requesting access and the policy is saying, hey, please, I want to see something like a certificate or a credential for you to really get in. Then you need to go to this identity service provider and get a token, usually some kind of digital certificate, maybe made with a digital signature that is, for example, qualifying, hey, you're over 18 or you really belong to that email address or has your address or so. You get that, and then you forward that to the relying party. And that is another way that is mitigating a few of the other issues, especially if you can maybe store the tokens here, but that already means you need to have something to store it, like a wallet. And in principle, the same things can happen. And depending on how old these tokens can be, you have the same issues about identity service providers learning about the relying party, because very often the tokens are specific. It's maybe not as radical as in the case before, but it can still happen. And the time of access and attributes that are requested are also going to be learned. Again, depends a bit on how much time you have here, but very often indeed these things need to be very, very fresh to be used. And on top of that, these kind of tokens are usually have values and much more of a user's identity than is needed. We see that like sometimes also with an identity card. Maybe you just need to prove that you're over 18, but your full birthday is maybe presented, and maybe also your place where you work and live, or by the place where you live is on there. So there is very often little control by the user on what is being moved forward here, because they cannot really manage the token. They just can forward it. And that means the relying party is often learning more than they're supposed to learn. And that is an issue. The more these infrastructures are needed and the more you are working with it, the more it becomes an issue, because parties are learning about citizens and they're supposed to. And wallets can overcome this. And this is bringing in some of the wallet elements that hopefully you will see in wallets in future, coming from some research projects that we did before. And what you see now is indeed, this is an architecture I will tell a little bit about, but the first element you see again, here the user was pretty much on bottom between those big parties. And now we're coming back to something that is indeed closer to the wallet scenario, with the user in the middle. And the main big point is you have also an issuer, an identity service provider, you have a relying party. Those are and you have the user in the middle. And the idea is now say, okay, users are getting from issuers some credentials. And out of these credentials, they can create like with the wallet presentation token. So basically what you need really with a service provider can be generated by yourself or by your wallet in principle. And in the old days by this ABC for Trust service architecture that was done. And out of the credentials that you get. So maybe you get a credential which is certifying your date of birth. And now you need to prove that you're over 18 or of legal age or so. And then you can basically recalculate this, or your wallet does that for you. And then you indeed present only that you're over 18, and that's enough. And that is one of the biggest things that a wallet indeed can do and can help people. Also, of course, you can store wallets as you need them, and do not always when you want to go to a service provider and relying party and ask for a new credential. So this issuer is learning much less about you if this thing is done properly. There may be some other scenarios where maybe somebody wants to see certain specific aspects of a credential token that can be maybe only seen by whatever kind of group of people, to uncover something in case of a crisis situation that can be there. And there can also be a situation, of course, to revoke credentials, which is with these kind of credentials a bit more complex than with classic credentials, but it can be done. The main point here is indeed for our wallet function, this thing in the middle. If you wonder what the magic is behind this, and we're not don't have time for a deep cryptologic or cryptographic analysis of all of this here, but it's maybe useful to take a quick look at how in principle these kind of things are working. And you will see two types of technologies that maybe some of you have seen. One is called blind signatures, the other one is called zero knowledge proofs. Both of them actually have been developed somewhere in Europe and are now owned by some US American companies, interestingly. One is blind signatures, who have been developed by some Dutch, and originally some Dutch mathematicians, and then the whole concept was sold to Microsoft, to have it under concept of U-proof sometimes used. And the zero knowledge proofs been used for that, and are very much going into a technology called IDMix, Identity Mixer, which was done at IBM Research Labs. It's not used very much there because the core team actually moved on. But anyway, that is an issue for maybe for German innovation management, or sorry, for European innovation management. But the other point here is, and that we want to see in the blind signature scenario, users are presenting quite a bit of the certificate towards the verifier. You don't see this wall here, you see the wall here. So you basically get, by sending some proofs, for example, I own a certain amount of money, you get something, and you send that, and you get a stamp or whatever kind of certificate saying, hey, yes, this party, even if they don't give their name, but just a pseudonym, they are valued and have a value of a certain amount of money, and that is then can be presented to the verifier, or maybe again they're over 18 or something. In the case of zero knowledge proofs, the wall of the identifier wall between user and verifier is usually indeed down here, whereas the relation to the issuer is a more open relation one, and you get certificates that say more about you, and then they're being changed here. In practice, they are, and again, can be used for the same thing. And one of the ABC for Trust projects in task was actually to make this reasonably interoperable. They're not fully interoperable because of different nature, but at least there is some joint set of functionality now that can be used. So these are some bases of, and that later came into wallets, or hopefully we'll see many of these things in the wallet in the end. But this is again the wallet picture that you've seen. And you see, hopefully, the kind of relation, yes, wallet users, issuers of documents, service providers again. But now, of course, somebody needs to provide the wallets. And that's why the member states and the wallet providers are coming in. And that's why this picture is a bit more complex, even though it covers only part of the functionality of this. So now let's have a closer look. And after we see wallets are in principle good and a good step forward to help citizens, and what are maybe the issues? And so what do we have? And we have this ecosystem. And let's start with the wallet providers. They are supposed to build the wallet on behalf of member states and to offer to citizens, residents, and businesses. And they also will provide ongoing technical support. That is the idea of a wallet provider. Obviously, they need to get paid by that. That is usually what the member states need to pay for. The member states, they get by this regulation that you've seen from 2024, the legal obligation to offer this. At least one wallet application to every citizen, maybe more if they can offer it, which obviously means, yes, some of your tax money will be used for something hopefully useful. And this gives a bit more detail on the first slide that we've seen, because we had the regulation in 2024. And yes, I don't have the color here, but anyway, what you see, the member states are responsible for all of that in 2026 and to have it widely accepted in 2027. And for that, several implementing acts were to be developed by European Commission and EU member states till November 2024, which was obviously 6 months ago. And maybe if you took a closer look, you will ask me, hey, where are these implementing acts? And indeed, they're not all out yet. Some of them are now in the pipeline. So things will take longer, which in principle is not a big problem, as long as things are done well. I rather like to wait a year longer for the wallet than whatever 2026, if it's done well. And now we will see. But there is obviously some rush here in it already because it's a big project. And yes, and of course it needs attention by civil society and people who are involved with it, and to get everything, all of this done. The sad thing is that these implementing acts, unlike the original regulation, are actually negotiated only between the European Commission and the member states. What you maybe see missing here is the European Parliament. That was involved, of course, in the regulation, like in Europe, also the Parliament as a citizen direct representation is in. But this is not, Parliament is not involved here. They can ask about it, but they're not at the table. And the whole thing is not really public. So only selected people are there, which means that whenever you learn something, you need to indeed try to influence things, which is not trivial. And for that, we will see now a few examples. So the first thing is, and now you see we're looking at the relation between those 4 elements here. And the question is, should service providers, so relying parties, And should they need a certificate to access the user's wallets? That's one of the questions that came up. So should any kind of party on this side be able to access the wallet of the user, or should only be qualified entities that are actually able to fulfill certain qualifications and be able to read these kind of wallets? And means that citizens would, especially citizens who are not experts, would be better protected against anybody just reading out these wallets. Of course, a wallet has quite a bit of sensitive information. Maybe, for example, some qualifications that we can have in there, some certificates, maybe that you have a certain disease, and for that you need whatever kind of treatment, but have certain privileges. Maybe not everybody should read that, but only those who really know about these certificates. So indeed, there was this scenario, and who should decide about this access to this wallet users? Should it be member states, or should it be just done in general? And of course, you can say in principle, this should be regulated in a way that citizens and users can understand it best, and it should be regulated in harmonization. And that was actually the idea of the regulation originally, but it needed some involvement and some stand-up by some, let's say, civil society organization to say, hey, yes, we want to have this made sure. At the moment, we can say, yes, this is okay. There were drafts being published, or maybe leaked, partly this, partly that. And indeed, they didn't have that service provider requirement to need a certificate to access users' wallet. But at the moment, this one is good. So it shows that, okay, when people are looking at in draft of the documents, which are sometimes not so easy to see, the drafts of these implementing acts, and they understand the details of this, like this little detail of power and relation between these parties, it works out. So in this case, indeed, we're in a good situation. And now, next thing is, can users have and use pseudonyms? Quite a bit of the data protection, of course, in social networks also works if indeed users have pseudonyms. I mean, maybe they need to be uncovered under specific circumstances, but there is quite a few situations, especially when you're maybe dealing with authoritarian circumstances, where indeed it is good that you can act under a pseudonym. And indeed, that was also the idea of the regulation. What is the status? Well, not clear at the moment. An important element here is also, again, that brings in some European Union stuff and even some ISO standards. You should be able, and that was in the wallet vision, that partial identities are part of the wallet vision. So what's a partial identity actually? It means that not all of your attributes are presented in all situations, but only a subset of them. That subset that is basically needed, to get access that you need. Again, maybe you just need to know that you're, and to show off yourself that you're willing to pay for something, and that you're over 18, or again, that you're of a certain citizen of a certain city, but not everything that is maybe known about you needs to be presented. Indeed, there's an ISO standard which has, after quite some discussion, differentiated between an identity, which is a set of attributes, like the partial identity, and an identifier, which is basically uniquely characterizing somebody. So that would be indeed a full ID card, which is, of course, identifying you as a person. And for certain applications like tax also, of course, this is needed because you need to be indeed fully identified. But it's the difference between an identifier and an identity. And that's an important thing to look at. And why different partial identities are important, and why indeed identity is something different from identifier. And if you look into literature into this, indeed you will sometimes see this mixed up. And that is a first alarm sign when you see some regulation, when people are mixing up identifier and identity, when only an identifier is really identifying somebody uniquely, then already there is a problem in the privacy scenarios. So can users have and use pseudonyms, which are obviously then not full identifiers, but indeed identities that can be useful? That is unclear at the moment. We have to, there is some documentation of the current drafts where it needs to be refined, and hopefully it will be refined into the right direction, but we need to take a close look at it. And whenever you have a related project and close to you, you want to take a close look, because there is definitely people who don't necessarily want that in that way. So then the next step is, indeed, will there be such a European Union-wide universal unique personal identifier? That, again, some people call identity, but it's actually more than an identity, or a very special version of it. And there was the idea to say, hey, this should be happening. That was what the regulation said originally. The 2024 regulation, where the parliament was at the table, said, okay, maybe European Union-wide for member state matching. So basically for a specific scenario, when somebody is moving from one member state to another member state, and we want to make sure that they're not, let's say, taking tax advantages in two member states while they're only one person, then indeed member states should have a chance to identify somebody who's moving from one country to another and see that their profile is the same one. So for this very specific application scenario between member states and wallet users, the issuers of ID documents should indeed have an overarching identifier. That was agreed as in, let's say, compromise for certain specific scenarios. But what you see in some of the implementation act now is that this European Union-wide universal unique personal identifier in a centralized identity management system and would be using for everybody if a national law requires this. So if a European Union member state has a feeling we want to learn much more about our citizens and have more richer profiles about our citizens, because maybe we can control them better, more than what the European Parliament actually had agreed to, then this may be possible. So this is obviously if we had color here, then you would see this red lighted. This is obviously a very dangerous thing and would actually to some degree jeopardize the whole good idea of a wallet. And we hope it can be amended before the regulation is finally, or the implementing acts are finally all out here. But that shows you have a very nice vision for a wallet. And then with such a small detail between this and this, you can destroy quite a bit of the night vision, which means one needs to really take a close look at what's going on. So this brings me closer. Yes, time is almost over. Summary, conclusion, outlook on all of that. So wallets, I think, are a great thing, a laudable initiative towards multilateral security, putting users in a much better position. Also a great opportunity to apply some advanced technologies in a distributed system for the sake of citizens and, let's say, the whole good balance in a proper civilized democratic state. But one needs to take a close look, which is probably true for all big infrastructures. But again, this is a new one. And small changes in implementing acts can have major impact, as we hopefully I could show you with some of these examples. Otherwise, please come back with questions soon. And detailed analysis, of course, requires a lot of dedication and effort. We're talking about 20 implementing acts in different documents in some stages. So, and all of them need to be fully understood to understand what is meant there. The European Parliament is not at the table with its by people there. So there is a number of civil society initiatives, and I think I'd like to give kudos to epicenter.works, sitting in Austria. They are in a good position because they have experts on this matter, and they have also, Austria is a small state, so they have sometimes easier access to some of the European Union member state documents, and that is indeed happening. And so they're very good, and quite a bit of the analysis that are presented now is coming from intensive discussions with them. And Raimundo was mentioning IFIP as a global organization of informatics and information processing organizations. Like the international version of CLAY, there is a CPIS version which is maybe related to CLAY because it's about Europe. We're working a lot with epicenter.works here. And again, that could be useful to maybe hopefully also if similar things are happening in other parts of the world. But indeed, it requires a lot of looking at this. And you can imagine that, of course, in these wallets will eventually also maybe be used in the health domain or maybe something similar with patient records. So this is not the beginning, not the end of a major development of digitalization. It's just the beginning of it. And that shows that, as I think, is really, really important. So thanks a lot for your interest. If you ever come to Frankfurt, you will find us in this building. But now we're happy to address any kind of questions and comments that you may have.
Thank you very much, Kai, for the excellent talk. It's a great honor to have you with us. It's open for questions. We have a question here. Can you come here? Just a minute.
Let me maybe know if we want me to go to a certain slide to address whatever to understand the question.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
Hi, Professor. Can you hear me well?
Hello, I'm Kai. Yes, good to see you.
Yeah. So I have a question in regards of security. One thing that wasn't very clear for me, maybe because I'm completely beginning on the subject, is I was not very sure how can we ensure that the issuer that is responsible for identifying the user is not like contaminated with any kind of malicious, code or something like that. Because when we talk about blockchain, we have kind of fault tolerance that guarantees if something is contaminated with a malicious activity, we can easily detect that by the multiple copies of the same blockchain. But I didn't understand how that could be made on this kind of architecture of wallets.
So you mean this kind of issue of this ID documents and maybe the issuers of attributes? Do you mean this party, the one that hopefully that you see me circling, the one in the left lower corner? Is that the one that you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. There is a number of. There is actually, that is older, let's say, previous regulation that happened. I didn't get very much deep into this. So, and as you notice, this is the EIDAS 2.0 regulation, the EIDAS 1.0 regulation in 2014, when they started about digital signatures. That includes quite a bit of requirements on this kind of issuer. That can be technical requirements, that they're supposed to only use a technology that has been tested intensively and certified. That could in principle be maybe blockchain technology if it can be managed properly, but it can also be other, let's say, maybe single track records. And then there is a number of organizational security measures by making sure that they are not infiltrated. And so when you want to be one of those, you have to, for example, you have to have a security concept with security management. You have to have technology that is tested. But also, for example, there is organizational requirements. For example, the personnel that you need to have needs to be checked on whether they have integrity. For example, if whatever a major person or an important person in that organization is maybe close to bankruptcy or has big debt or something like that, that would be eliminated due to a risk control scenario, and to make sure that they are not, and because of personal problems, then get bribed into something. So that's all is at a quite compound security element of it. And there's also some kind of let's say, thing that you need to come in. You need to have enough money to survive, or need to have a mother company also to survive. So, for example, there was a daughter company of German Postal Services, which then German Postal Service said, hey, this is not making enough money, so we're going to put that company out of the market into bankruptcy. And then the regulatory authority, which is sitting beside it, said, no, you're an important infrastructure here. As long as your mother company has money and the German Post Service has money, you're not supposed to simply cut down the shop. Otherwise we will go after your mother. So there's quite a bit of regulation behind that. And you're pointing out with blockchain that indeed, and in most cases, the regulation that is not making so much use of organizational overarching things. That could be an interesting development if one wants to go further into this and say in future we want to have maybe a multi-party overview of these kind of things that may be useful for some scenarios. It's an interesting idea. I haven't seen it implemented yet. At the same, and then that could be nice maybe for future things, but honestly, so far, not so much happened here. So we didn't have the big scandals here so far. So the regulation as it was reasonably working. It was just that this was quite expensive. It could still be interesting to say what you may want to actually do a study on this in more detail if you're interested. There's one big challenge, which is coming in, of course, as you know, and some of the certificates that are being issued here and some of the information that is kept, for example, the relation, you can maybe also have here in this thing, you have relations between the pseudonym and the real name of a person. And of course, that is indeed information that should not always be in the public. If everybody would see the relation between my pseudonym and my real name, then of course the whole idea of a pseudonym, of a certified pseudonym would not make sense anymore. So there's a limit to what you can do with a blockchain in this scenario, or you would have to modify the blockchain in a way that certain elements of the blockchain are not visible by everybody. And so indeed that's a challenge. What may be interesting for you, you may remember I mentioned the Jan Kamenisch group in the Edemix, in the Edemix picture. Oopsala, here, these people. So especially Jan Kamenisch and some of the people he was working with on this technology. When IBM lost interest in this to come, or didn't show up enough interest, indeed Jan Kamenisch was moving to a major blockchain developers. So he's now involved there in working on blockchains. I'm trying to remember what the name of the company is, but you will find, I don't remember at the moment, you will find it out. The first name of Jan is Jan Kamenisch. And they're doing some certain things, are trying to integrate blockchain with some of these privacy properties, which again is not trivial. I think they're working for this now for 10 years. They've got a good upgrade to their salary as far as I know, and have good time to work on it, but it's not trivial. So you're touching on a very important aspect, like how to integrate blockchain into this, and at the same time to preserve privacy for what is in the blockchain of certificates. Hopefully that helps a bit.
Yeah, very clarifying. Thank you very much.
More questions? Yeah. Kai, just another question what about failures in part of those systems? Because you have an integration of different, local, let's say, authorities. And the implementation issue about privacy, as you mentioned, is a big one, but how about the availability of the system, as this is going to affect the whole, let's say, Europe, So do you see a big challenge there as well?
It is a challenge, but I think it's a manageable challenge if you put in enough money for redundancy of certain elements. I mean, it's clearly this is not an infrastructure that you should implement via the cheapest of all possible implementations, because then you will end up in trouble. You need to put in a certain degree of redundancy. Like, for example, I mean, I don't know how it is in Brazil, but I have, for example, just for a small subset of this, I have two different credit cards in my purse from my wallet from two different credit card providers, just in case something goes wrong with one of them. And that is definitely something that you then want to have. When it comes to the wallet, of course, you as a citizen, again, some member states are indeed investing to maybe have not just one wallet to their citizens, but maybe a few of them, so that in case something goes wrong, you maybe have an alternative. Not clear whether small member states can afford that. Actually, for small member states, maybe they need to partner up with one of big technology companies to do something. We have to make sure that is working out properly, and that not then the small European Union member state becomes dependent from a technology provider who's then maybe reducing the whatever kind of protection level. It may be useful, and we have to see that whether maybe for the wallet side, it may be useful that maybe one can find an agreement between member states that every citizen can not only get one wallet and from their member states, but maybe also one from a neighboring state or so, to have some redundancy. But we're not yet there. I mean, let's first just implement this, and maybe that is something that should be coming soon. The other thing, of course, where all of the other infrastructures that you see down in here, indeed, there needs to be some proper level of redundancy. And ideally, I would like to have such a wallet, but I probably will not give up my purse in the first years, because that is another element of redundancy. But again, I mean, we have been dealing with big infrastructures like that for credentials, even if they were simpler for mobile communications, where you have some of these things. And we have to, so I see a way to manage this complexity, but clearly it requires investment. That is for sure.
Thank you, Kai. There are some questions coming from the remote audience. Mateus Souza, the previous one. The first question that was there was, is OID for VC the expected global standards to be adopted? That's the first question. And if you could, can you answer that? And then we have another one.
Well, I can make some remarks on that. Whether I have a full answer is a good question. Maybe we can also discuss it. What I would imagine is maybe for the rest of us, and I suppose I don't know whether Matthias, whether you can see what I put into the chat, or whether this is just private. So I suppose you mean OpenID for verifiable credentials, which is the full name of this whole exercise. And OID for VC, I suppose you are one of the experts involved with it. But I trust you mean OpenID for verifiable credentials. could be, is being negotiated. And my last knowledge about the OID protocols is that they have some limits when it comes to privacy-friendly attribute-based credentials, basically dealing with pseudonyms. Certain things are possible, but not all of them. So I'm not sure that this will be the global standard. I can imagine something close to it, and I can also imagine that it will be one of the implemented versions of it, but and it will be relevant. But I'm not sure that it will be the only thing that is going to be used in all scenarios. Maybe you can come in with a few of points of view on how you see and whether this OID 4VC is actually able in the end to work with us. Let me see that. We'll go forward and backward here. And with
okay, thank you.
Your view is how much it will be able to deal with these kind of attribute-based credentials and these kind of technologies, whether you have the feeling that OID in the end in a version will cover it in full, or whether it will only basically have only maybe some pseudonyms that are only managed by single ID providers, because that's what I last time I think remember when I looked at it. Could have some kind of pseudonyms maybe, but it was all pretty centrally controlled in some degree.
Thank you, Kai. There is another question. It's the last one because we have running out of time for the break, for the lunch break. So the question is, are you currently using Indy Cosmos or Bizu as infra? That's the question from Mateo Souza. It's on the screen.
Okay, so I mean, I am not me personally, but I mean, I'm not directly involved, of course, in this wallet development. I'm a university professor. We're doing some research. I don't know. I would expect that some of the national implementations of the wallets are using this, but and I would not assume that it's all of them. So give me a second, whether I can quickly see. Again, what you want to keep in mind is there is not just one wallet development happening all over Europe. There is some kind of harmonized regulation so that they can all somehow interact in some way, especially relying parties in one European member state and wallets in other member states. But there is not a common infrastructure development. So probably some of them will use something of this and some of them not. And honestly, at the moment, I'm just checking out whether I understand what BESU, B-E-S-U is. Let's see what that one is. I suppose it's an. Do you actually really mean BESU or do you mean maybe BECU, the banking login thing? Or do you mean the Apache licensed something? That is the Ethereum client. That is BESU. That is again. My understanding is that what if you mean BESU as this Ethereum client, that is of course for specific money, and these kind of wallets, maybe I should make that clear again, they're not so much for payment. They are wallets for basically ID cards and attributes. The payment systems are not covered by the wallet in that degree. So from that point of view, if I see it correctly, if I understand correctly what you mean with BESU, that is a different scenario. And for Ethereum, if you mean it as a ledger thing, again, ledgers are not a mandatory technology for this. So I would say, in general, the answer is rather no than yes.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe
thank
you want
very much,
to
Kai.
detail the question in detail the question if we have time for that, but.
Yeah, we don't. I think we don't have more time for questions because we have a lunch break now, and then we have a talk by Paulo Verissimo in 2:00 p.m. here local time. It was a great honor to have you with us, Kai, and thank you very much for your time, for your attention, and see you another day.
Okay, yes. Thanks a lot for the invitation again. I feel very honored, and good luck for the rest of the event while I will go to sleep now probably, or maybe I follow a bit as a visitor. Actually, can I see what's going on here after your break if I stay on, or is it? Do I need to leave the room?
Yes, it's live. Yeah.
I see. So let's see how long I can get to stay alive, and then maybe
you can go to the website, to the YouTube, and LaSiD, UFBA, and the talks are available there. Your talk and other ones. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, and have a good lunch. Enjoy.
Thank you.